it's just for the younger girls. That's what she said when I asked why I wasn't invited to my own grandchild's baby shower. The cake was ordered, the balloons were up, and my daughter-in-law was glowing in every photo posted online. And me? I was sitting in the very house they lived in, a house still under my name, a house I still paid homeowners insurance for. I stood by the window, holding a photo of my son as a baby, wondering how I had raised a man who could let this happen. But what they didn't know was, I had already met with a real estate agent. And the papers were signed. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, this story is for you. Stick around. You're not alone. It was a quiet Sunday morning when everything started to fall apart, or maybe, when I finally saw what had been in front of me all along. I was in the kitchen, preparing my usual breakfast, 2 slices of whole wheat toast, a bit of homemade jam, and black tea with a slice of lemon. The sunlight poured in through the window, casting a golden glow on the countertop I had refinished myself 15 years ago, back when I bought the house. Then my phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. Curious, I clicked it, and there it was. Emily's baby shower #Baby Logan is coming. My heart skipped a beat. The caption read, "A perfect day with the most special girls in my life." Below it, a photo of them in a circle, all smiling, surrounded by powder blue decorations. Emily, my daughter-in-law, wore a lace dress and a flower crown, her baby bump already prominent. Standing beside her was my younger sister. My son's cousin. Even the girl from next door where they used to live. Everyone was there. Everyone, except me. My hands trembled as I scrolled. Photos of baby shower games, the dessert table, the little party favors. In one of them, my sister had commented, "Everything looks beautiful, sis. You deserve it so much." I pressed the phone to my chest. My throat tightened, as if an invisible hand was squeezing it shut. I rushed to the bedroom and called my son. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, Mom. Everything okay? A baby shower?" My voice was barely a whisper. I didn't even know there was going to be one. He went quiet. "Oh, yeah, Emily planned it with the girls. It was kind of last minute. But, everyone was there. Everyone but me." He sighed. And then he said it. "Mom, it wasn't personal, okay? It's just. Emily thought it'd be better to keep it to the younger girls. You understand, right? Younger girls." As if the blood in my veins was too old to celebrate the birth of my first grandchild. I didn't respond. I just hung up. And I sat there. On the edge of my bed. Completely still. It was in that silence that everything changed. My name is Margot Evelyn Saunders. I'm 62 years old, though some days I feel 80, and others, barely 20. Age becomes a strange thing when you've spent most of your life trying to prove you're strong. I became a single mother at 28. Matthew's father was one of those artistic types, full of dreamy speeches about freedom and living in the moment, but nowhere to be found when reality came knocking. When I told him I was pregnant, he muttered a stunned, "Wow," kissed my forehead, and disappeared for good a week later. I never saw him again. For a long time, I thought that said something about me. Now I know, it said everything about him. Raising Matthew alone wasn't easy. But it was the most beautiful thing I've ever done. I worked 2 jobs for over a decade, receptionist at a dental office by day, academic proofreader by night. I'd spend hours correcting master's theses for international students, fighting off sleep and shoulder pain, while Matthew napped in the next room. I remember one night in particular, the fan was broken, July heat hanging in the air like a wet blanket. Matthew was asleep on the couch with his worn-out teddy bear, a thrift store find, tucked under his chin. It was all so simple, and yet so sacred. When he turned 11, we moved into the yellow house with the front porch. It was modest, but it was ours. I bought it by myself. I made sure my full name was on every paper, Margot Evelyn Saunders. People said it would be easier to co-sign with a man. I just smiled. I was the man of the house. Matthew grew up surrounded by love. There was always food on the table, bedtime stories, handwritten notes in his lunchbox. When he wanted to learn piano, I saved for months to buy him a used keyboard. When puberty hit hard with acne, I took him to 3 different dermatologists until we found one that worked. And the birthdays? Always homemade cake, lopsided, imperfect, covered in whipped cream and love. He used to laugh and say it looked ugly, but he always had 3 slices. I gave everything. I was mother, father, mechanic, cook, tutor, therapist. I learned that real love is quiet, and giving without applause is a form of faith. When he got into engineering school, I cried for 3 straight days. Not from sadness, from pride. We did it. I signed the student loan papers. I meal prepped frozen lunches for him. I took a 2-hour bus ride every weekend just to see his face. Even when my body screamed for rest. I smiled. Because it was all worth it. But the first crack in our bond appeared the day he brought Emily to dinner. She was pretty, polished. Soft makeup, stylish clothes, polite smile. Sweet in that overly sweet, artificial way, like the frosting on store-bought cupcakes. She called me Miss Margot, even after I asked her to just call me Margot. She corrected me with soft condescension whenever I asked about her work. It's not just marketing. It's sensory brand experience, she'd say. By the second dinner, she was already asking if I'd thought about remodeling the house. We could make it feel more modern, more open. More clean. She said this while staring at my dark walnut bookshelf, the one my father built by hand. I began to notice small shifts. Matthew stopped calling as often. Stopped showing up on Sundays. Started choosing her family over me, quietly but consistently. And slowly. I started disappearing from his life. The final blow came in 2020. They both lost their jobs and called asking for a temporary place to stay. Just 6 months, Mom. That's all we need. Of course, I said yes. How could I not? I set up the guest room with fresh towels, a bouquet on the nightstand, and even gave them the master bathroom for privacy. But the months stretched on. And on. The home office I once used to write, to dream, to breathe, became a nursery. Emily decorated it with vinyl tree decals and started talking about Montessori furniture and hypoallergenic rugs. She never asked if she could. Neither did Matthew. I kept paying the homeowner's insurance. The utilities. The internet. They paid nothing. And still, I was the one left out. The day I found out about the baby shower on Instagram, something inside me shattered. It wasn't just the exclusion. It was the message behind it. You don't belong anymore. But they forgot one thing. The house, the one they now called home, had a soul. And that soul still carried a name. Margot Evelyn Saunders. That night, after scrolling through the baby shower photos on my phone, I didn't sleep. I tossed and turned on the living room couch, covered only by an old sheet and a dull ache in my chest. The kind of pain that doesn't scream, it gnaws. The house was dark except for the dim blue glow from the hallway. I could hear their muffled laughter from the bedroom, as if the world were a light, uncomplicated place. As if nothing were out of place. As if I didn't exist. I sifted through my memories like searching for justification, the sleepless nights nursing Matthew through fevers, the days I worked sick to pay for his tutoring, the first bike, the first haircut I gave him at home, the first report card with top marks. I remembered the time he fell from the tree and scraped his knee, how I sat on the ground with him, wiping the blood and promising the scar would become a story to tell. How many scars did I have? And who had ever cared about them? At 5:43 a.m., I got up. The sky was still gray. I threw on a robe over my pajamas and walked to the small closet in the hallway, where I kept old documents and memories I'd never had the heart to throw away. My fingers trailed over the folders until I found the one labeled in bold letters. Property, deed plus finances. Inside, the silent proof of a lifetime. The paid-off mortgage from 2014. The insurance policy in my name. The property taxes paid, even in years when my paycheck was late. The deed. With my full name. No one else's. I sat on the floor, clutching those papers like they were a testament. Because they were. They were the testament of the woman I'd been for over 30 years. And maybe, the woman I could still become. That same morning, I took a long shower. Put on clean clothes. Tied up my hair. Swiped on a hint of lipstick, something I hadn't done in months. I opened my laptop and searched. Fredericton real estate agent. Trusted. Discreet. That's how I met Amanda Russell. She answered the phone with a firm, professional tone. No small talk. What do you need, Mrs. Saunders? I took a deep breath. I want to sell a house. It's in my name. But it needs to be handled quietly. And legally. She asked a few questions, verified details, and within 48 hours, the first documents arrived. Fast. Efficient. She didn't ask why. Only how. And when. In the days that followed, I wandered the house like a stranger. I traced the pencil marks on the kitchen doorframe, Matthew's height at 8, barely reaching my shoulder. At 12, already taller than me. I gathered old photos, little mementos from the living room shelf, a frame of my father at my grandparents' wedding, a vase my mother gave me before she passed, a bookmark with the words that had guided me for years. You deserve to stay, too. The irony stung. On the 20th day, Amanda called. We have a buyer. Above asking price. Cash offer. I can issue the eviction notice today. It's your legal right, Mrs. Saunders. I was silent for a moment. Then I exhaled. Do it. That night, I left the envelope on the kitchen table. A still warm mug of tea sat on top of it. The paper inside was folded in thirds. The official sale notice. And the eviction warning. Vacate within 30 days. The next morning, I returned from the grocery store to find Emily in the living room, perched on the couch, face flushed, eyes wide. She clutched the envelope like it was a weapon. What is this? She shrieked, shaking the paper. Is this some kind of joke? It's not a joke, Emily. It's a notice. The house is sold. You have 30 days. You can't do this to your own son. I just looked at her. For the first time in years, without fear. Without guilt. Without flinching. You did it to me first, Emily. When you erased me. When you cut me out of my own family's story. Now, I'm just closing the chapter you wrote. The news of the sale hit the house like a bomb. At first, silence. Then, whispers behind closed doors. Finally, sideways glances, like I'd betrayed my own family. But I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't slam doors. I just kept packing. Slowly, deliberately, like closing a book one page at a time. I wrapped my mother's china, the books I'd read during lonely nights, old letters, black and white photos with handwritten notes on the back. Emily tried to confront me again. Called it selfish. Said the baby didn't deserve this. That I was making things impossible. "You're destroying this family," she spat. I smiled. A sad smile. "The family was destroyed the day you decided I didn't belong in it." On the 30th day, I walked out with just 4 boxes, a suitcase, and a heart stitched back together. Amanda helped me load everything into the new apartment, a small 2-bedroom downtown, in a walk-up building that smelled of stale cigarettes and burnt coffee. But it was mine. For the first time in decades, a space that belonged to me. That first night, I slept on the sofa because the bed was still in pieces. Cooked rice in an old pot and ate straight from it. No table. No company. No voices through the walls. And I cried. Face buried in my hands, like I could drown every word I'd never said. It wasn't regret. It was grief, for a life I'd finally accepted was over. The next morning, I woke early. Sunlight slipped through the gap in the makeshift curtains. The air was cold. I made coffee, sat on the floor, and opened my old laptop. Stared at the screen for a long time. Hands hovering over the keys. Then I typed. Chapter 1, The Day I Became Invisible. The words poured out effortlessly. As if they'd been waiting years for this. I wrote about being a single mother. About the fear of failing. About loving so hard you forget yourself. About the silence that grows between 2 people who were once inseparable. I wasn't writing for the world. I was writing for me. For every swallowed word. For every silenced scream. For everything no one ever wanted to hear. I wrote until dusk. Then, on impulse, I copied a paragraph and posted it on Facebook. I was left out of my grandson's baby shower, but I still owned the house he was going to live in. So I sold it. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is freedom. I closed the laptop. Drank the last of the now cold coffee. And went to sleep. Expecting nothing. By morning. 3,421 likes. 1,098 shares. Hundreds of comments. Women saying, "This is my story too. Thank you for giving voice to what I've felt my whole life. Keep writing. Don't stop." And there, sitting on the floor of my simple apartment, I realized something I'd never imagined. My pain was universal. And my story was no longer alone. In the days after that first post, something unexpected began to happen. My phone, which had only ever buzzed with spam or bank alerts, now chimed constantly. Notifications. Comments. Friend requests from women of all ages. Some wrote long messages. Others just a single line. But they all said the same thing, in different ways. Thank you. 2 simple words, but now, they carried weight. Thank you for saying what I never could. Thank you for showing me it's not too late. Thank you for reminding me I exist. By the 3rd week, I created a page with a name that came effortlessly, as if it had been waiting inside me for years. Notes from an Invisible Mother. I posted excerpts from what I'd already written. Then I wrote more, rawer, truer, more intimate. About the silences that kill you slowly. About cooking dinner and eating alone. About watching your own family turn you into furniture, useful, but voiceless. And the strangest part. No one asked about Matthew. No one said, but maybe he had a good reason. They understood. Because every one of them had, in some way, been Margot. By the 2nd month, an email arrived from a small publisher. The subject line was direct. "Your words moved us. Can we talk?" We scheduled a video call. The editor, a woman named Lena, hair in a bun, eyes glistening, told me she'd read every post with a lump in her throat. "You don't write like a writer," she said. "You write like a wounded woman. And that's why, it's impossible to look away." We struck a modest deal. But a fair one. She'd help me shape the posts into a book. I'd keep full control over my words. I began organizing chapters, dividing them by themes. The before. The slow erasure. The silent explosion. The escape. The written scream. As I worked, I rediscovered forgotten fragments, unsent letters, old journal entries, imagined conversations with my younger self. And I cried. Not from pain. From gratitude. A month later, an invitation, a live interview on Instagram for a group called Women Rebuilding Themselves. At first, I hesitated. Afraid to show my face. Afraid of judgment. Afraid I'd seem too drastic. But then I thought. Drastic? Or finally, free. I went. I spoke from the heart, about the baby shower, selling the house, the tiny apartment, the emptiness, the blank page. And about finding myself again, but only after everyone else had left. Nearly 8,000 people watched. The comments flooded in, wave after wave of recognition. One woman wrote. Margot, you saved me from going back to a place that erased me every day. Another said. You're the mother I lost. And the woman I want to become. For the first time, I felt my pain hadn't been wasted. It had become a bridge. My voice, stifled for so long, now had an echo. Then, an unexpected offer. Margot, ever thought of turning this into a podcast? It was Anna, a young audio producer. I'll handle the tech. You just talk. The words. You already have them. And so, Invisible Voices was born, a space where I read my essays and shared stories from other women. I recorded in my bedroom, a blanket draped over the laptop to muffle the echo. Every Friday, a new episode. Letters began arriving. Gifts. Books. But most importantly, stories. Stories of women erased by husbands, children, bosses, churches, neighbors. Stories of fresh starts at 60, 70, 82. Then one day, at a neighborhood cafe, the barista stared at me. You're Margot, right? From the podcast? I smiled, hesitant. Yes. She pressed a hand to her chest. Thank you. You made me start writing again. I'd forgotten how much I loved it. I walked out with tears in my eyes. Not from sadness. From belonging. The past came knocking on a cold October morning. The kettle whistled on the stove, the sky hung low with clouds, and I sat at my new apartment's balcony table, reviewing the final chapter of my book. Outside, orange leaves pirouetted in a silent waltz. The air smelled of cinnamon. The doorbell rang. My body froze mid-sip. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door. There they stood. Matthew, shoulders hunched, stubble shadowing his hollow cheeks. Emily in sweatpants, the baby swaddled in a blue blanket against her chest. A wheeled suitcase behind them. The scene belonged in a tragic film. And for a heartbeat, my chest ached. But my feet stayed rooted. Mom. Matthew's voice cracked. The new house isn't ready. Our backup plan fell through. We've got nowhere else to go. Emily stepped forward. Her eyes, once so dismissive, now glistened with desperation. Just a few weeks. It's temporary. Please, for the baby. She rocked the tiny bundle gently, as if the motion might sway me. And for one fractured moment, just one, I wanted to say yes. To do what I'd always done, fix, shelter, endure. But something inside me, something forged in the fire of losing everything, rose up. I remembered sobbing alone on my unpacked sofa that first night. The metallic taste of exclusion. The shame of realizing how long I'd tolerated my own erasure. And then the words I'd written in the dark surfaced. You don't have to keep swallowing what diminishes you to prove you're light enough to be seen. I exhaled. Steadied. I'm sorry you're in this situation. Truly. But this space is mine. I built it alone. With grief. With grit. With choices that carved flesh from bone. Just as you chose to move forward without me. I choose not to return where I was only ever half welcome. Matthew stared at the floor. Emily bit her lip. But the baby, she whispered, he's your grandson. Yes. And he's blameless. But you had time, so much time, to remember I was his grandmother. And your mother. Matthew dragged a hand through his hair. I messed up. I should have stood up for you. I saw what Emily did, and I stayed quiet. I'm sorry. The apology landed somewhere deep. But it didn't undo the wound. I don't need your guilt, Matthew. I need you to learn. Because I did. I learned that sometimes those who claim to love us most are the ones who erase us best. That love shouldn't come with enforced silence. Or conditional belonging. I deserve more than that. And now. I give myself more than that. I closed the door softly. Not in anger. In peace. Returned to the balcony. The tea was still warm. The cursor on my screen blinked at the end of the manuscript. I typed the final line. Sometimes the bravest love is no, first to others. Then to the versions of yourself that accepted crumbs. And hit save. Like saving a life. My own. The launch of my book took place on a Saturday with shy sunshine, in the small community bookstore that always smelled of fresh coffee and new paper. The yellow lights created a welcoming atmosphere, like the embrace of an old friend. Each chair occupied by a woman, some with gray hair, others with eyes carrying old fatigue, all with silent stories waiting to be seen. Behind me, a small banner with the title in cursive letters. Notes from an Invisible Mother, by Margot Evelyn Saunders. When I was called to the microphone, my hands trembled slightly. I took a few seconds before I could speak. When I began writing, I thought it was just for catharsis. A scream in the dark. But it wasn't. It was an echo. It was the voice of thousands of others who, like me, were forgotten after giving everything. For those who were called dramatic. Too old. Too sensitive. Too invisible. Timid applause began and suddenly became intense. And, for the first time in years, I didn't cry. I smiled. In the months that followed, my story became more than a book. It became a movement. Hashtag Invisible Mothers No More started appearing in publications, discussion groups, radio shows, and even school bulletin boards. I received invitations for podcasts, lectures, interviews. A larger publisher contacted me. They bought the rights and suggested an audio version. Who will narrate it? They asked. I will, I answered, without hesitation. I recorded every word with my own voice. The same one that nobody used to hear before. Now, impossible to ignore. And then came the most unexpected proposal. A play. With mature actresses. Who would enact excerpts from my story interwoven with their own. It was during rehearsals that I met Harold, a widower, cultural organizer, with a calm gaze and slow speech. He didn't ask me about Matthew. He asked me about myself. About my favorite books. About the dreams I had put aside. About what I felt when no one else was looking. We became friends. Then, companions on long walks and unhurried coffees. And, one day, travel partners. Lisbon. My first time outside the country. Facing the Tagus River, reading letters from readers while the wind tousled my hair, Harold held my hand and said, "You haven't just changed your life, Margot. You've become a lighthouse for so many others. And that is rare." I looked at Portugal's cloudy sky. And breathed. There was silence within me. But not the kind of silence that hurts. The kind that suffocates you. It was the silence of someone who, finally, no longer needs to ask for space. Of someone who no longer fits into small frames. My journey didn't end there. But it was there that I understood. The life awaiting me was much greater than the one I was denied. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Comment below, which part of Margot's journey moved you the most? And share with someone who needs to remember that it's never too late to start over. Now, click here to listen to another powerful story of overcoming and transformation. See you there.